All right, call the meeting to order of the Municipal Airport Authority, our meeting May 23rd, 2023. We've got a few people out there on Zoom, and if you would, just make sure you mute so we're picking up background noise during the meeting. And of course, don't forget to unmute as you provide that input into the meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of May 9th?
Motion.
I have one small change.
Okay.
Let's see, it's page number 7, when we were gonna identify 2 marketing consultants. Consultants. Okay.
Okay. Mr. Ingram, would you amend your motion to include the amendment?
I move to amend my motion at the time to include the amendment.
Second.
All right. Good motion and a second. I'll call it.
Hagan.
Aye.
Captain.
Aye.
Aye. We have airport vouchers totaling $263,090.19 in your packet or detail. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? We have a motion and a second to approve the vouchers. Please call the roll.
Hagan.
Aye.
Captain.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Item number 3, we have individual vouchers, again with detail provided in your package for items A through J. We have a motion to approve.
Motion.
A second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the individual vouchers with detail provided in your packages there. Call the roll, please.
Aye.
Captain.
Aye.
Aye. Number 4, continue discussion regarding parking structure analysis and options. More goodies. Was the information from SP Plus distributed to everybody?
Email.
Okay, emailed, so.
Greg Pearson is on.
Okay, good. Greg, thank you for all your work there and all the input. We'll be discussing that shortly. I'd like to just quickly go through the process that we went through with Bailey. And understand that this was a consulting engagement with Bailey. This is not their work product. It's them working with us to build a model around the various studies that we have. So what we have today is kind of a draft of the first output of that. And to get started, this first page are some of the assumptions that we looked at. And from that, then a model was derived. And so the 2 critical ones you'll see marked in yellow there, parking spaces and daily costs for garage parking. Those are the 2 big drivers of this model, but there's lots of other detail in it. So if we just kind of run through this very quickly. Option 1 was 3 stories with a roof. Option 2, 4 stories with a roof. The square footage is picked up from the Walker report. The parking spaces 729 in option 1, 973 again from the Walker study. And then that marginal increase in parking. That's, we are going to lose 238 short-term spaces, it would seem. And so the 2 options there, 491 or 735. Capacity we set, and this is a variable that can be changed in the model, but we set capacity at 60%. The, if we look at our recent history, we've been running 70+%. The information we got from SP Plus yesterday seems to be a little above that 60%, but just trying to keep a nice conservative number there, 60%. That translates into the garage usage days of 107,000 versus 160,000. And I know, Greg, you did this a little different in this study. In the first study, you talked about a 29% cannibalization from long-term surface lot to the parking garage. So we plugged that into this equation. We did not have time to kind of get through all of your new numbers in there. So that's just kind of where we plug that. And that's a difficult number to come up with, is that we know we're gonna have some of our customers that will absolutely use surface parking and we'll be transferring it. So that has an impact. The rate that we put on the parking garage, again, just trying to be conservative at this point, we use a $21 a day rate. 19 is the long-term rate now, or short-term rate, short-term. The 21, that number we can adjust. We can go up, we can go down. What that translates to in the two different models is 2.2 million versus 3.3 or 3.4 million. I was able to go through the SP Plus study, and Greg, we're in the same ballpark with these, estimates. Now, the lost revenue from the lots is, again, we're assuming those 46,680 on option 2 times the dollar amount. So we're gonna lose revenue or cannibalize ourselves, kind of moving customers from surface lots into the parking garage. And so the impact of that, option 1, 343 to 513. Again, these numbers they're tough to get to. There's also, and when we look at sort of the next model, there's also a gain in those 238 spots that move from short-term into covered parking. And so there's a potential, depending on rates, of about $5 a spot for the 238 that are given up. And that number we've put in the spreadsheet, it's not in here, and it's one to be kind of discussed and understood. The operating costs we pulled from SB's prior report, using their percentage in the square foot, or operating costs are not per square foot. So we think that's a reasonable number. The maintenance reserve, again, pulled from the SP Plus. And what the maintenance reserve, it's actually contemplating creating a funded reserve. So we would take out of operating revenue maintenance dollars and create an account for this. So debt service kind of coming from operations of the facility, 1.6 to 2.6 million, depending on size. If we approach the city and the city would dedicate another mill to us, the mill is about 803,000. The net effect is about 762. That's a full 5%. And again, these are kind of where we start splitting hairs. The discount people can take when they pay their taxes early, at the earliest date, is 5%. The net on the mill is about 3%. Now, not 5, but we just ran it at 5%. So then that gives us our debt service total in there. So this sheet that I handed out, and like I said, we're still in draft mode on this, checking for breaks and formulas and different things like that. What this spreadsheet that I handed out is for an option for a 4-story ramp with a roof, and the construction costs that we use is again, we had, Rich gave us some additional numbers. They were actually lower than Walker numbers by about $1 million, $1.5 million, which we think we can achieve those. But we plugged in for the 4-story with roof, the full $38,072,000 from Walker. Again, this is just how we're kind of approaching this. The rest of the assumptions are at the bottom of the page there. They kind of see where that goes. So as we pull this in, and again, I wish I had a big draft stamp. Please write draft on this. But as we pull this together now, and we just ran this for the 4-story, what you'll see in year 0, we would be asking for the mill levy this year, if it were available to us in our kind of year 0 construction year. We would, we believe we would be able to collect the proceeds of that mill. So we would start with $782,000 in that year 0. This is all dependent on time. So if we get actual through construction and into our operating years, and we did not try and go through and say, are we gonna have revenue losses during the construction period? That's gonna have a great deal to do with the timing of the construction. If we're under construction during the peak 4 months, yeah, we're gonna have some lost revenues. If we're under construction when capacities are down at 50%, we may not. So, but if we just look at this, how this rolls through in year 1, you're gonna pick up revenue with the garage of $3.38 million. And the second line there, that $260,000, that line is the change in the rate from short-term surface parking to covered parking. So we're picking up that, additional $5 in there. And the revenue reduction that we're anticipating, the 29% cannibalization from our existing lots, is minus $513,000, and the mill levy then coming in at $762,000. So we're gonna have operating revenue in our first year of about $3.9 million. We deduct our operating expenses of $237,000. We do our maintenance reserve, where we'll actually fund a reserve account for continual maintenance on the building. So our total operating expenditure is about $290,000. That rolls then into the construction costs of a little over $38 million. The $38 million, the way we approach that, and this is just again the model, we said we'll put 5% of the construction cost in as cash. Looking at this, we could use 10%, we could use 0, but that we've got some surplus cash that we would invest in the field, and this model anticipates 5%. This runs a 25-year amortization, anticipating a bond finance. The unknown for us is the Bank of North Dakota program with the 2% 40-year money would really, really improve the debt service capacity of this. But we just went ahead and modeled this a 5.5%, 25-year bond. And so our debt service principal of $688 and interest of $1,958, 2.6 million. Total expenditure is 2.9. And so the without depreciation, and if we include depreciation in here from a pure accounting standpoint, we'd probably be pretty much flat. But we have a profit there of about $954,000. And so first year we're anticipating a debt coverage ratio of 1.36. The bond consultants will tell us what they think they need in that coverage ratio. And sort of the low end to start would be about 1.25 times. So 1.36 in the first year, utilizing the operating revenue and the mill levy. And so as we roll this out, and you gotta flip it over on the back, it rolls out to 15 years, it could go all the way out. But if you wanted to start seeing what's happening, we're letting revenue grow at 3% a year. We're letting expenses grow at 4% a year. And we're letting the mill levy grow about 3% a year. Mill levy growth in Fargo has been all over the place. It's been as high as 15% in some years, but I think those are some pretty basic assumptions. So as we roll through this and we start to see your cash balance line down at the second line from the bottom, we start building cash in addition to the debt service. So that just kind of continues to build through. We ran this through 15 years. I could run it out another 10. But really what we were interested in and our concern in all of these, when you're running a project like this, is your early years cash flow. How do you get up, get established, and operate? And so this gives us some confidence that we have the ability to cash flow this project with the mill. Now, at some point, Commissioner Strand, I think you can address this. As we start building higher cash surpluses here, and our debt service coverage ratio gets above 1.5, the city, is always concerned about mill levies and wants to keep taxes as low as possible. The city may want to say, hey, we don't need to run the mill levy for 25 years. John, I don't know if you want to.
I can't speak to the appetite within the commission as a whole. My sense is that would be a really practical approach to get to the point where we've leveraged you to get the project going and cash flow and break even, and at that point I think that'd be a real respectable discussion to have. Question would be, why would you continue it if you don't need it anymore? And secondly, of course, the city's support, I would guess, if it's there, is going to be there as long as you need it. So it's all in the sausage making.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Question. So in the process, if we get a mill and we carry it out, get a cash balance or start accumulating money, the general purpose of that fund, the parking fund, is to accumulate, grow, so you have dollars to build further infrastructure and maintain what you have. So instead of doing away with the mill, why wouldn't we keep it and continue adding structure? I guess would be the question I'd have.
I mostly want to know what your board wants and what your ask is. I think the support will be there. I anticipate it'll be there regardless. Now, I don't know if you're talking about a loan or if you're talking about a repayment or if you're talking a partnership with the city. I don't know what all that translates into necessarily.
Mr. Chairman, I think, just a couple things. One, I appreciate your comments. Looking at the projection, and these are all just drafts, but it looks like the difference in our net income from year 1 to year 6 is about 600,000. We're building that revenue. And so if there were a mill in there that was there for probably, 5 to 6 years, something like that, then if it's working, we should be able to offset what that mill is. And, I would support that mill going away unless at that point there's some other issue that we feel important about that needs infrastructure, then I think we go back to the city. I'm always concerned about just leaving a mill on and saying, don't worry, because there's absolutely, we'll find a way to spend it. But I think this is kind of a unique thing for this parking ramp. And so, again, from my perspective, just roughly what we've seen, having the city approve a mill, sunset it, again, wherever this falls in, somewhere between 5 and 7 years, I think would be really helpful from the city's standpoint.
Mr. Chair, was the 38.7 million the all-in cost or estimate? I understand it's an estimate.
That was a Walker estimate, and
Architectural costs.
yeah, that's, construction, 25,165,000, engineering and architecture, 2.5, stormwater, 715,000, APGS, 675, total of 29, and then the fourth level of 9,038,072. The Rich's numbers were about 5.
Yeah, 33 million roughly. That includes a roof, and that's 4-story at 973.
973.
So that's all in though, right?
That does not include the architectural.
It does not, okay.
Correct. Just construction.
Well, Mr. Chair, I just caution everyone to
Estimates.
focus on these specific dollars that much. I mean, I appreciate Madhav stepping up to the plate, throwing this out. I mean, there's a lot of variables in this whole thing. But I think for me, the question really, and I'd like to go through SP Pluses. I don't know if you've done their proposal yet.
I looked at theirs, and we will go through that.
I've got a couple questions on
Yeah.
that, but I think also I apologize for being late. We had 19th Avenue Road construction.
I just barely beat you.
Good.
They are putting a ramp up there.
From my personal perspective, my hope this morning was just to say, would it be feasible or not feasible to do a garage or a ramp? And if it is feasible, which kind of feels like it is, then I think the question is the city willing to participate or help with that? Because I don't know if it works without that. So, that's kind of me personally where I'd like to get to. And again, I appreciate the work you've done, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the work that everyone's helped kind of plug these numbers in. And I think it's appropriate for us to challenge these numbers if we don't like those assumptions or we think it should be something else, because it is kind of hypothetical, right?
Well, the one thing is I was pushing numbers around last night. Commissioner Shannon will appreciate this. It just dawned on me. The mill levy is set each year. And so, and a current commission can't obligate a future commission. Now we can have an understanding about that. But what we would be looking at is each year the commission and the authority getting together and saying, okay, your request now is for 3 mills. How are you going to use those 3 mills? And this would become part of it. At the point that you would look and say, you know what, there's sufficient debt service coverage within operations, then that discussion between the authority and the city might be to lower that mill levy. And so that becomes, because I thought, how would we word this to get to a sunset? And if we had a sunset and there was a problem, how would we reverse that? But it seems in the system itself that it would sort of be apparent in the process. And so, it seems like when the mill levy goes up, it never goes back down, but I do congratulate the commission over a number of years. You were actually able to bring the mill levy down. And I would think that we would approach this in the same manner, is that if we don't have a true financial need, if we can cover the expenses through operations, we shouldn't rely on the taxpayer dollars.
It occurs to me that the city would be getting a lot of bang for the buck with, if it's conceivable that in 5 to 6 years, conceivably, that mill may not even be needed anymore. Look at the result we'd get with a $6 million investment.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and knowing that the city very much would love to partner, looks forward to this development in our broader community. You know, and I would, my thinking is, and this is just thinking, is maybe the sooner we sunset it, the sooner we modify if there is any kind of a payment plan, that's taken into consideration, because I'm thinking that in a lot of our heads, I wouldn't have expected it to get done in 6 years. I would have been prepared to go the whole route, you know, which is a real different commitment over time. And as for the committing future commissions, and Stacy might know this too, but maybe we would have a memorandum of understanding that would clarify our commitment.
Yep.
So that it isn't left to the whim of future politicians, and you'll have different board members too.
Right.
But I would say the more we could embed that and memorialize that agreement, however it's vetted, if that's possible, that would be valuable.
Yeah, I think that would be a crucial step.
The language of a bond, if you issue a bond, the language of the bond in terms of how you identify how you're gonna repay it, would be true if it's based on real levy money, that would be used.
No, you always have to, when you're relying on legislative bodies meeting, you have a non-appropriations clause. And so you actually would most likely be selling a City of Fargo bond, and with the non-appropriation language that says to the buyers, beware, this is not backed by the full faith and credit and taxing authority of the City of Fargo. And if the money is not legislatively provided for it, there is a bond service. So, but there's a number of different types of bonds that can be sold in this. So that is something that the bond council will take into account. Non-appropriation bonds are used all the time. The university uses them all the time when they build dormitories. Things like that. Yes.
Well, so I'm trying to get these numbers. So on this sheet here,
Yep.
you're showing net income of 2.5 million.
Yep.
For option 2.
Yep.
Okay, and so then on this sheet here.
Yep.
You kind of running that out over 7 years.
Yeah, you miss that part. It does run out, on the back it runs about to 15. The difference, this sheet is just kind of the summary.
Sure.
And
So I guess my question is, how does this 2.5 tie into this sheet? I'm assuming because your revenue in this sheet is 3.3 million.
Yep, there's 260,000 in the spreadsheet.
Oh, up here.
Up here,
I
that
see.
260 is not on the summary sheet. And Rick, that's one that's open for discussion. That's saying you lose 238 outside parking spaces, but you gain 238 in the garage with a $5 premium attached to that.
Okay.
So that comes out to the 260.
So, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Where does the $5 premium come into the numbers? Because our current numbers are 19.
These numbers run at 21.
That's not $5, I guess.
Let me go back and look at the formula. Pull the numbers out.
But generally that makes sense. On this sheet, you've got the 3.3 million, you've got the plus 260, minus 5, and then the mill levy is 3.8.
Yeah, and the loss revenue, the minus 513, that arbitrarily goes out 10 years and stops.
Sure.
And we say at that point, we're at capacity. So
So at what point do you combine this potential project with the current terminal expansion project and all the work he's doing?
That's the next step. If we're gonna go forward with this, our steering committee with the city, we do have a meeting scheduled for Wednesday. We'll be meeting with Commissioner Strand and Mayor Mahoney. We can kind of get, what's their take, if it works. No, we've got no way to increase mill levy or whatever, but at that, we would hope to come out with a pretty good understanding of the commitment between the two parties. And then we can bring Horowitz to the table on this, and I'm sure that this is just a worksheet to get high level visibility into this whole process. We can go much deeper. The SP Plus materials get much more detailed, and we'd blend those two together. And then I believe it would be, if it is going to be a mill levy, we would be requesting that mill levy at the May 30th commission meeting. And so we would be indicating to the commission that we would be asking for 3 mills for the upcoming fiscal year.
This is for fiscal '24.
So at that point, then we are going to have to make some determination. I would think we would be able to start the process and do an RFP for architect and engineering. But we will get to a point by late summer or early fall that we're going to have to select an architect, start that process. Then we're committed. We're
Mr. Chair.
spending real money.
Sean, how does this affect the facilities charges and the cost to the airlines?
Well, you can't increase rates and charges to the airlines for parking facilities. That's separate. So when we, at our next meeting, we will be, you'll approve a request to extend the airline lease and operating agreements for 1 more year through December 31st of 2024 at the current rates. And then the goal would be working with John DeCoster, who's we've retained to help negotiate our next lease and operating agreements, would be to have a new rate structure in place by January 1st of 2025. So,
Well, we aren't getting into the passenger facility fees or anything.
no, this has nothing to do with
This is separate.
well, not necessarily, because the parking lot revenue, along with car rental revenue, is what we use to share with the airlines to keep our cost per plane low, which is the gold standard for airports to keep that CP low. So any impact to that revenue flow towards revenues to the airport could have some potential impact to their cost per plane. That would be pretty significant for your ultra low cost carriers.
But this doesn't anticipate adding costs at this point.
That's to be seen. Because the maintenance reserve, as it was explained, I think by Rich in their report, was to re-hulk once every 3 to 5 years. I don't know that the maintenance expense, and maybe Greg from SP Plus can speak to that, included, there's 3 elevators in the structure too, what that cost is, cost of daily cleaning, electricity, all of that. If that's 300,000 a year, I'm not sure if that, how that figures out for square foot.
Well,
We'll see.
what we've done is take the various studies, we've done the best information available and plugged it into this. And so if there are needs, changes, and things like that can all happen.
Correct.
But we can't kind of circle this thing continually without putting a stake in the ground and saying, we're moving forward, we need to get to the architectural services and fees, we need to get to bids. This is just an estimate, this is just a forecast. The one thing I'll guarantee you about forecast, a 100% guarantee I give on every forecast is a bond.
And I think we met yesterday with Lee Compton and Leibowitz and Horton to give an update on some of the costs.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
So we met yesterday here with Leibowitz and Horton and Lee Compton to update some costs for the terminal project so that they can update their models just for the cash flow of the terminal project itself. And there's a lot of assumptions made in terms of how much federal funding we may or may not get. And if we don't receive the federal funding that we're estimating, then we're into a bond issue for the terminal. And I think what Leibowitz and Horton will present just on the terminal where we're at now will be pretty eye-opening for you in terms of the concerns of the cash flow. And then to put this on top of it, I guess we'll see where it goes. Still negotiating that contract with the golf.
Well, again, my perspective, we want this information. If it looks like this is possible, you guys are gonna meet later this week, talk to the city, and we're not making a decision whether we go ahead or not.
Correct.
And I think then if we find out where the city's at, and if the city says, yes, we're willing to do this, then I think it comes back to us to fine tune this and make a decision, do we wanna move forward, do those first steps, fine tune these numbers, make sure that it's, makes sense.
Well, and we approved the terminal expansion with the cash flow and everything included that would be available, you know, so you're introducing new information here.
Sure.
That hasn't been part of the discussion. And, you know, that's, yeah, this is my opinion, but if we do terminal expansion without parking expansion, we're gonna look really foolish. So, where would we like to go from here? Are there other questions? Are there assumptions that anybody is saying, really not comfortable with? There's,
Mr. Chair, I'm not comfortable with $21 a day. Number one, I don't think the model supports that. I think it's closer to 25.
That's, yeah.
That's,
well-
we could agree on that right now and take a lot of variables off.
your model bus open,
It won't,
pretty quick on revenues. We just have to be cautious.
I agree.
And, you know, the SP Plus was, Greg, help me on your, looking at your one last night, wasn't it 70% occupancy and $25?
So we didn't do the rate of $25, but the occupancy, you're spot on. That was kind of discussed ahead of time to try to have every lot, primarily the garage or short-term lot level at 70 to 75%.
Which, that's a really powerful variable, the occupancy. And you used 21, didn't you, or 20?
So we listed 21 as the recommended rate that you could actually go up to today if you chose. But the revenue projection was based off of the current rates across all three lots, 19, 11, and 9 respectively.
We can certainly.
So the process is essentially by the time you get to having the garage, obviously it wouldn't be 21 at that time, it would be north of that figure. The most recent rate increase we had, we went from 18 to 19 on the short term back in October. We saw no loss of demand once we made that increase. And then if you look at the very back, there is a rate analysis of the PDF that shows by lot what we suspect you can increase the rates to today without having a impact to demand, which would be an impact to occupancy.
And then you had another revenue item in there, about 50,000 a year, and that was for the parking reservation system. Is that?
That is correct, and that was one variable that we did not include the first time around, and it was by design, just because it was somewhat new, and we didn't have enough baseline data to really project. But we've kind of leveled off and that amount that we included is a pretty conservative yet stable figure. And then we just increased it year over year by the employment growth.
And correct me, it was 50,000 a year, or?
It was 40, let me double check, I believe it was 40 for the first year.
Yeah, okay. The other thing that's not included in here, and it's again, just trying to figure out what is eligible for grant funding. There's another 3 million that can be built into the model. I think everybody would support the Skyway across, but there was some, thought that may be eligible for FAA funding under safety grants to separate cars and pedestrians. So that's not built in.
Yeah. But the Skyway is
No, that's
very low on the priority,
the
right?
problem we had. Yeah.
I think a zip line would be more fun.
Yeah, roller bag and zip line.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I would ask, Greg, do you have a copy, you maybe don't have a copy of what we just put together?
No, this was just pulled together.
What I would ask, Greg, if you could get a copy of what we just put together, and we've got option 2, and if you could just put your numbers together in that same format, and really I look at this down to where it says net income for debt service. And really that's where we have, on this sheet, we've got 2.5 million.
Yeah.
Plus, I think we'd add 260,000 if I understood right.
Yep.
But I think that would help looking at your estimate kind of over this next year and then this estimate, and we're probably going to be somewhere in that middle.
Okay, I could definitely do that.
I think you have all the information here, it's just organized a little bit differently.
Then we can plug it right into this.
So,
And like I said, this is still
Well,
graph.
the 25
Yeah.
also.
Mr. Chair, also, could we as a board agree on 3 or 4 stories and start that, be ahead of that as well too, instead of juggling 2?
Well,
define one and-
that's why I just ran this, kind of the most expensive case, the 4 stories with roof. Because you do get pretty confused when you get, at one point we had 6 different models going, and it was ridiculous. We had $19 rates, and
So
no roof and with roof, and 3-story.
one other question. We show the cannibalizing of the prior dollars. What were those funds gonna be used for that, we've cannibalized it for, I don't think it's gonna be 5 years. I'd say 3 years is cannibalizing it enough.
Well, we ran the
I know.
that 10.
I don't think that's necessary, but in that period, what would those dollars have been used for, Sean? What are they used for other than just servicing debt? Because we make the assumption it all goes to service debt, and that's not reality, because there are other uses for the dollars in other parts of the property, the parking service property, that are being used, revenue
Well,
used for.
and, this model, you have to believe in growth. That we're generating new revenue from marginal revenue from existing customers, and with the convenience of covered parking, that we're gonna pick up additional revenues. So, I know in the legal way support, they were planning on those cash flows, but it did not consume, the total cash flows.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's the crux of it, is we need to know what we're making now without the ramp, and we don't want to go backwards. And I think SB Plus showed about, 2.2 million in additional revenue from where we are right now. But I think that's key. That's, why it's critical, again, to have some help.
Okay, so, we'll run the model at 25. Is there an appetite to run the model at 70% occupancy?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
If you don't mind, I think we leave the 3 million Skyway independent right now. We could build it in.
So, Mr. Chair, Sean, can you explain the issue of priority for the FAA? with projects, so we understand that.
Yeah, in a nutshell, and Jeff can help me, Tom Showers on, I think, from Meeting Hunt as well, but, the things that, are gonna take the highest priority are obviously out on the airfield, runways, taxiways, things that improve your clear zones and safety areas, out on the airfield, lighting. When it comes to infrastructure itself, the terminal building is an example of that. We're only about 70-some% eligible right now in the modeling with the FAA. The Skyway, probably would have been completed if UPS hadn't been here. The walkway would have been done. UPS showed up and said they need the cargo ramp there. They said, well, that's where you spend your money. It's a higher priority need. I don't know if there's any other explanation, Jeff, other than
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So
it's just a very
most
low
area of highest need, so it's eligible, it's just.
So if we were to spend the money, what we would do is put the cost of the Skyway into a PFC application, and someday we would recover the cost, but it could be years and years down the road, once you put the terminal project ahead of it and some of the other needs that we have. So, but I know Monica Weddle's on here. Monica, I don't want to put you on the spot. She's with Legal Support. She does all the modeling. What information do you need, Monica, that you haven't heard here today?
Thanks, Sean. Good morning, everybody. Well, first, let me just state that what your comment about PFC on the Skyway is spot on. That would be, it is an eligible cost from a parking structure to a terminal building, but it is, as Jeff said, very low priority. The airport's other commitments of its AIP and AIG funds would rank way higher on the priority. And frankly, what we've modeled out is that the majority of the airport's future PFC collections at the current level of 450 are going to be committed either to debt service on the terminal building or to future reimbursements of previously incurred PFC eligible costs or future costs like snow removal equipment, that type of thing. So right now with the legislative cap of 450, there's not a lot of room to fund a $3 million walkway, although it is eligible. So if that rate were to go up, that'd be a future possibility. I think just having looked at the SP Plus analysis and just getting a glimpse of the other analysis you presented this morning, I think there just needs to be kind of I think exactly what Rick was saying, a reconciliation kind of those two analyses. And then what we discussed yesterday with Sean is that we'll be updating our analysis on the terminal building based on current costs, current cash flow and funding sources, and look at where those numbers stand today, and most importantly, look at the assumptions that are in that, because we had previously assumed about $35 million of discretionary money for the terminal and the associated aprons. What's the reality of that? What happens if we don't get 35 and we only get 15 or 20? That's going to put additional pressure on the airport's cash flow just to execute the terminal project. And then what will be left over and available for, 5% down on the parking garage or something to that effect. My principal, Steve Horton, also has been very involved with Sean, talking to the Bank of North Dakota related to the debt financing that's been that we've been programming now for about a year for the terminal building, how that debt would need to be structured to anticipate there being some future debt, with the future debt being in the name of the airport authority or actually in the name of the city, because that could certainly impact some things. So I don't know if I just answered your question, John, but I think some reconciliation on the garage will update the terminal analysis, and I think that will paint a little bit of a picture of what the airport's financial situation would be after the terminal construction without the parking garage, and then you can add the parking garage analysis on top of it.
And I don't want to chase this right now, but I do have a question. The Bank of North Dakota money, are you modeling that at 2% in the 40-year amortization? Yeah.
Yes, sir. 2% at $40 million, 25 years. And again, that's the cap for, as we understand, any municipality. So I think if there's $40 million secured for the terminal, I think, Sean, tell me I'm wrong, but I think that is the cap.
That does seem to be, and I thought the AM on that could go out 40 years.
30.
Is it 30 or?
That from Scott Wegner, so. Yeah, it can go up to 30, but I think they're
I
moderate.
thought it was 40, Rick.
Well,
It
yeah,
doesn't matter.
I mean,
but-
obviously, these are long-term things, and so the longer we can.
Well, and that's another question that we don't have the answer to right now. I don't know that we could come back and ask for another 20 million in infrastructure financing on top of our 40. But this is where the partnership with the city may come in, is that perhaps the city could, on one of those sources, partner with us. But I agree that's kind of the next step. So if we go back here now, we'll run this model again at 25. Do we want to look at a 3-story, no roof, 3-story with roof, 4-story, no roof, 4-story roof?
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to get in a long, lengthy debate on the design. I mean,
Yeah.
from my perspective, I'd rather have 4 stories without a roof
Yeah,
than 3 stories with a roof.
right.
And, you know, I'd rather have 4 stories without a roof than a skyway connector.
Yeah.
So, but I think what you've laid out here and what, you know, was presented as far as cost makes a lot of sense.
All right. And I'll see if I can talk to Bank of North Dakota. We maybe just put that out of the equation entirely.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Chairman, I agree. I think we got to figure out if we're going to go forward or not. And if we go
Yeah.
forward, financing and construction, these are all key components to.
Well, the next key step is meeting with the city and seeing the city's appetite. We'll lay this out with the city and kind of talk through it and what the appetite is for their participation in the project.
Yeah, that'd be my question. Is there anything else you need from us, John?
I don't think so from the city's perspective. From my perspective, and this is after visiting as well with one of your board members, Paula, I'd sure love to see what's down in South Sioux Falls. You know, I'd love to have the city and the airport authority, whoever's interested, get in a little bus, go down and see their parking ramp, see their new terminal, just seeing things. If there was a value and an opportunity and a moment to do that, I would personally benefit from visually knowing and seeing what they've done down there, and it's so similar to us, but that's just another.
We're an airport authority, shouldn't we fly?
We could fly. I'd like that even better.
Keep in mind that the Sioux Falls ramp, they just broke ground on that like a month and a half ago, so
Okay.
it won't be finished for a couple of years.
And is that a 4-story, or how big is
There's
there?
pictures of it, I can find out, I believe
Okay.
it probably is. It's a little over 1,000 spaces. Greg is involved in it, SV Plus is gonna manage it, so, I don't know, Greg, can you tell him how big it is?
Yeah, it's just over 1,000 spaces. They have real estate to do some exterior, I guess, advertisement, if you will, similar to what you would see with parking garages attached to convention centers and things of that nature. They did have initially the Sky Bridge as an alternate in their bid, but obviously they accepted that as well and decided to do it at the same time. So it's very eerily similar to your point. And so there's definitely, I'm pretty sure, some value with consulting with Sioux Falls as well.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to lose that point because I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
As we're going into projects that are going to be 100 billion plus, I think it really makes sense for us to go to Sioux Falls. I think Des Moines, which I didn't know about, apparently has, in those cities that are similar to Fargo in size and are kind of feeder but have some destination, I think it'd make a lot of sense for us to think some point here in the next couple months to, you know, you could hit maybe 2 or 3 of those airports in one day. And you're gonna learn so much from people that have just gone through it. And they'll say, I wish we would have done this, wish we would have done that. And so I really think that would be very powerful to do. And I'd be willing to help figure out how we can coordinate something like that.
All right, so,
And
do we need a motion or just, let's try to pick a date?
I'm happy to make a motion if it's required.
Yeah, go ahead.
I move that we explore touring Sioux Falls and if possible Des Moines as well, and talking to their airport administration, things that they've learned along the process. And
Is there a second?
Second.
John, is that something you can reach out to?
Provide me new schedules through them, but like I say, there's nothing to see because they're both just literally starting construction. But I mean, if you wanna go down, what would the goal be if you don't have something physically to see?
Well, I think Sioux Falls, just to tour the facilities, look at what they're doing. I think, you know, if we could arrange a discussion, sort of milestones they've achieved and how they, what those type of things.
And in Des Moines, the difference there is the state of Iowa's paying 100% of the cost of the parking garage, so there's no local.
Well, they're,
Let us know. I mean, it's-
well, Mr. Chairman, I'm assuming they're ahead of us, right? By 12 months or something like that. I don't know, but I think, and maybe it doesn't make sense for us to rush down there and look at it right now, but I think it'd be good to meet these people face to face that are kind of our peers and decision makers and just, I mean, make that connection, and then as we're going forward, you know, maybe there's an opportunity for us to do a Zoom call with them, you know, once every 6 months or a year. Or I just think everyone tries to reinvent the wheel, and it's like, yeah, I'm the worst of it, so I just really think us taking a pause, we're gonna learn something, even if we learn, I don't know what, I think it would be a good takeaway.
So one similarity I'll point out is with respect to the phasing, and you all touched on it at the beginning of your meeting as well. How do we adjust and pivot where we're displacing some of our short term during this construction, and so they actually displaced their short term lot in its entirety. And one of the ways, granted they didn't have reservations, and you already have reservations at your airport, so one of the ways we're trying to help mitigate that is to promote and push reservations to their economy lots and other areas, but they also incentivize through the construction process the contractor to be through a certain point during their off-peak period. That way they can make sure that they minimize and mitigate that loss of revenue as best as possible. So I think just from a planning standpoint, whenever you guys get to that point, that would be of use. But to Sean's point as well, they don't have a structure yet. It's all flat right now, and they're just kind of working through getting mobilized, if you will.
Mr. Chair? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, also I might add, Sioux Falls has 7 gates, and they have some different art and things that are throughout their terminal that are unique to South Dakota. And so I think that's another thing that we could do is gain some inspiration from the size and scope of their current terminal in regards to how it reflects their state and their community.
I think it'd be good going through this, absolutely.
We have a motion and a second.
Mr. Chair, a comment. I think we should understand also, we're about to spend $150 million in 3 years with all the anticipated or commented projects, and we still have a substantial amount of projects we are doing throughout the facility right now. We have to keep that in mind too, that those things have set a priority and need to be done, but it's $150 million with the 3 things we've talked about: terminal, ramp, and skyway at a minimum.
So, do you think fall, September, October?
My question would be, when is Mr. Burke's plane available to be used?
Well, that's it.
Or jet, excuse me, that was an inappropriate statement.
Football game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be, again, I think we do this, maybe Sean can reach out to those different airport authorities, find out where they're at and kind of what works for them. And
Yeah.
it might even be something that we forego one of our Tuesday meetings and use that morning to go and hit these places and be back.
Okay. Just for planning purposes, it's this fall. All right. If we can circle back then, in our modeling, we're gonna go to 25 on the ramp rate. That will change.
Well, and I would say, Mr. Chairman, one of the cool things here is this formula is something that anyone can play around with it however they want. And so what we have is an Excel sheet that I put together, and that might even be something that, again, again, if people wanna reach out directly to Chad or
Yeah.
something, cause we can do a lot of different modelings, but we don't wanna I don't think we wanna get it confusing where we are right now and what we're taking to the city.
Where it is right now is, we've got a lot of, we've got some calculations that are hand calculated and inputted instead of formula driven. We will get that cleaned up and there'll be an input page and you'll be able to go in and
Mr. Chair, I was just gonna add something that might be helpful. In your calculations during the construction, as Greg mentioned, like using the other airports, there was a change in the short term, they moved it, whether you choose us or someone else, the goal would be to build half of the structure at once, allowing half of the short-term parking that's existing to be in use, and then switch it around. So our hope would be 50% would be the maximum impact for the 1 year construction. So I just thought that would be helpful.
All right, so we will clean up this model and make it sort of input driven, but to begin with, Rick, you wanna see $25? Is everybody comfortable at 60% or do you wanna push that occupancy any higher?
Can't we just talk about doing 70%?
Do it at 70%? Okay.
I think 60 is a good, I mean, that gives us a cushion. We're adding 900 parking stalls.
I don't know how to say this, but at some point we blow up with too much cash and have no need for.
I mean, I think we need to be realistic on this stuff, but
How about if we split it at 65?
Around 65. And then, Rick, you were saying that the lost revenue, the cannibalization, just do it 3 years?
Well, no more than 5, because the utility of the space is fully functional then. I continue that beyond it.
Okay, we'll do the 3. All right. Any other discussions, questions there? This is just information at this point, so. Anything else? Right, I have a motion in the midst of another discussion, motion for the tours of sort of peer airports, call the roll please.
Thank you.
Aye.
Berg.
Aye.
Captain.
Aye.
Heckler.
Aye.
Aye. All right, so sorry to take so long on number 4.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify from my perspective, we're internally meeting tomorrow, and then the cities will have its request from the airport authority to put on our agenda, which our deadline is Thursday, and then the presentation to the city commission, the request will be formally then received on Monday evening at 5 o'clock. Tuesday with the holiday.
Okay.
So we're all on the same page there?
Yes, we need a mechanism, I don't know if we can pull together a Zoom call just to report to you, our board, what the recommendation is, so we can have that approved, take the formal request on Tuesday.
So, the request for the mill levy is just to make sure it's in the mayor's budget, correct? Because it's not formally approved until October, correct?
And it's somewhat to a degree the first public volley, so the messaging, the narrative, the story, this is the first time out of the gate, maybe. Tell the community the vision, so I would capitalize on that opportunity and not leave it too lacking of substance and vision.
And Sean, help me, remember last year, did you do a presentation requesting the 2 mills?
Unfortunately,
So we'll have to pull that together. Huh?
not too difficult.
No,
Whatever you want.
but we'll be asking for, we'll find out tomorrow if
Yes,
we're
it's on
gonna
the
ask for
agenda.
3 mills. If we're shut down at that point, then we've forward. So the 2 mills would be the continuous support of airport operations with the 1 mill, and whatever it is we agree on to enhance the plan for parking garage.
So then is it the goal of the board to have the parameters of that facility, to work those numbers backwards so that we have some common agreement on size, vehicle count, occupancy rate that we're taking to you?
That would make sense, Rick.
Okay.
I wonder, I'm just concerned about it's hard enough having one group plan it, let alone 2 groups. I mean, I think our ask to the city is for 1 mill or 2 mills, whatever you decide. And then when you do that, it's our responsibility to build a parking garage, rather than get into all the minutia of that with 2 different groups, and someone's gonna be upset and stop it or whatever. And so I guess, again, from my perspective, there's a sequence here. The city says, yes, we're willing to do that. Then it comes back to us and we say, okay, we're willing to go forward, right? Based on architectural review and those overall costs, and we'll probably have 2 or 3 checkpoints. And if we hit all those, then, you know, financing, construction costs, that decision on what we build ought to rest with here.
Absolutely.
And I think informing the city all along is great, but I don't think it should be something that we're going to the city and saying, do you want 3 stories or 4 stories?
I agree.
That's why we here should do that ahead of time, so that conversation is, here's our pro forma of a 3 or 4 story ramp with this many spots, assuming this much occupancy at this rate. And
When you say ahead of time, I'm not sure. What do you mean?
well, the chair is gonna go in front of the board, or the city commission. And if he goes without that information and a commissioner asks, well, how big is this gonna be? You have to have a reference point. You have to have some reference to your.
I disagree, because I think we have the general reference point now. We're going to the city and say this doesn't work without some support. And so I think the city
That's
really
fair.
just needs to make that decision on whether they want to do a mill or not.
But if the city commissioner asks a question about, well, how big is this gonna be? We
Well,
should have
I think
some,
we could, we've got, we've got the parameters around that.
but we as a board haven't agreed to it yet.
No, we
which
haven't
have
agreed
do.
to it, but
I would hate to rush this in 24 hours and say it's gonna be 4 stories, 3.5 stories, or all this kind of stuff. Go to the city and say, here's what it's gonna be, and then it's not gonna be that, having to go back to the city.
But these will be our assumptions that we agreed on ahead of
Right.
time.
yeah, we've got the assumptions. What we did, and we were crunched for time here too. We sort of took the most expensive route, the 4 stories with the roof, with the walker, estimates. And that was kind of our first stop. That if that wouldn't have worked, well, then you start backing down. But the parameters would be targeting those assumptions. But if we get out, we get into the market, or you get into the design phase, and there's changes, and it has to be 3 stories, or that's all going to be part of it, because it's still all going to fit within the revenue projections. And so if you're comfortable with this, and again, this would be authorizing Rick and I, who will meet with the city. If you'd authorize us that, whatever we can negotiate with the city for their participation in the form of
You're sitting
levy,
on that meeting too, right?
that we would go forward with it at this time. We still aren't writing a check at this point. We're going forward and saying, we've met with the city, and Commissioner Strand and Mayor Mahoney believe they can have support of the commission for this. This is what it is. We ask for that. It goes into the preliminary, and we continue our process. But we will very quickly, if we're going to proceed, if we're going to try and target 2024, we'll need an RFP for architectural services. Terry, what's it take, a day and a half to design one of these?
It'll take a while.
Little while.
3 weeks for sure, so find code, and put it in paper for 3 weeks, that's
Yep.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Commissioner Strand, are you gonna be comfortable us walking into the room and sitting down and going, we just want 1 mil and kinda got an idea, or would you prefer this board to come to you and have the board say, here's some assumptions that we've all agreed on up front. We know they can change, but they're just assumptions, so we're not going all directions with those talking points and move on to the numbers part.
I think it's important that the context is that the airport authority is making these decisions, and that the assumptions you're approaching them with right now, I think that'd be okay to share that. I'd welcome it. I'd like to know, like, what are you talking about? You know, how far are you thinking? You know, I think you can keep it in those general parameters. But we don't want to enter into a space where we're all debating and all of a sudden you got city commissioners turning your project upside down because of their input, or, you know, so I would state on your messaging as to what you're envisioning, what the assumptions you're looking at, but what it'll look like likely, what you're expecting. And you know, again, this is the first moment for the public to get this story, probably, in a public setting. So, and I want them to be excited, and the community to know.
Well, I want to be clear, maybe we're talking, maybe I think we're saying the same
I think
thing.
you are, actually.
I mean, I think my vision was what you laid out here, this option 2,
Yeah.
is kind of, I'll call it not the worst case scenario, but a very conservative projection. And I would make a motion, if you'd like, that we take that scenario to the city.
Okay.
And there's 100 different things we can change there. We can change the rate, we can change the percentage, we can do that. But I think at this stage, taking what you presented here to the city, I think it's that first step. So, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we take option 2's assumptions.
Okay. Then,
I second.
Could you expand it a little bit to just say that, and that what we can agree to with the city, that we would then make that our request before the commission for the mill levy? Or do you want it to come back? I'm just, our time frames.
Well, yeah, I mean, basically, I think this is kind of our request.
This is your request.
Yep.
So,
Okay, and so
I think,
how they're gonna participate is how they're gonna participate. Okay, that makes sense. All right, we have a motion and a second. Joan, did you get that convoluted, once removed motion?
To present option 2 as it was presented today to the city.
Okay, all right. Call the roll, please.
Hang it.
Aye.
Bird.
Aye.
Caput.
Aye.
Aye.
Osgood.
Aye. All right, well, it's up for 2 now. Number 5. Excuse me, we have change orders for TF Powers for some dirt work, I believe that was for 83.
Yeah, so when they excavated in the water main on this boulevard, you'll see it probably as you leave today, just the south edge here. This has always been a low spot that's held water. So in order to fix that, here's the property ran the TF Powers in this up. It's pretty well on grade right now. And then they'll be seeding it, so that's the cost for the additional work.
Motion.
Second,
Second.
call the roll.
Hang
Aye.
Bird.
Aye.
Caput.
Aye.
Heckman.
Aye.
Osgood.
Aye. Number 6, a 1-year extension on Eastside terminal lease, and does that include the 3%
Yes.
increase?
Motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Call the roll.
Hang
Aye.
Bird.
Aye.
Caput.
Aye.
Heckman.
Aye.
Osgood.
Aye. Number 7, the American Legion wants a 3-year extension on their terminal lease, and this is, this was, they're painting the roof, or?
No, this is American Legion.
Oh, American, okay. Yep, all right. And is there the 3% increase in that also? Okay,
Motion.
second,
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Hingham.
Aye.
Bird.
Aye.
Atherton.
Aye.
Atkinson.
Aye.
Osborne.
Aye. Okay, the bid tabulation recommendation for meat and hunt on,
Great, yeah.
oh yeah, part of our, that,
Okay, so, this year it's a one-year extension, so for my, these guidelines within the lease, the roof on that hangar, and it's the old Victor Velke carousel hangar, and it's not cheap here. Extremely rusted, so as part of the aesthetic improvements and requirements that we put forth in the lease, asked them that they need to either replace or repaint that roof. I think they're looking at replacing it on the carousel in order to get it into an aesthetically acceptable condition. So Ryan has agreed to a one-year extension, and if at the end of the one-year extension, they fulfill an obligation, they'll be granted an automatic 4-year extension, a total of 5 years. If not, they'll have to come back to the board. They've,
and this is at their cost?
yes,
Is there an escalator in that lease then, the 3% or?
we already approved that a while back, so it went from 8 cents to 12 cents to 15 to 18 cents.
Okay. All right,
Motion.
we have motion, do a second,
Second.
call the roll.
Hingham.
Aye.
Bird.
Aye.
Atherton.
Aye.
Atkinson.
Aye.
Osborne.
Now, the North General Aviation apron expansion.
Well, we're having some contractor issues, so the bid opening did not happen on May 22nd. It's now been extended to June 2nd, and Jeff can explain the issues that we're having with underground pipe contractors.
Correct, so, like John said, we're extending the bid date to the 2nd of June, and the reason for that is because the night before, the initial bid, I got a call from a general contractor that said that they can't get any underground quotes, and there's a fair amount of storm sewer on this job. And my understanding is, just underground contractors are so busy, or that, you know, the specific project, didn't fit their schedule. So they hadn't been reaching out to, the pipe manufacturers, Oldcastle and, Ricker in Hawley. So they didn't know anything about the project, so they didn't have time to put, their bid together. So they weren't gonna bid it, and, obviously if we don't receive, quotes for the underground subcontractors, the primes can't bid. So we extended it to the 2nd of June just to allow more time for, the pipe manufacturers to get their bids together and quote the underground with the prime contractors, so.
So since our South General Aviation project was delayed due to the soil contamination, this is now our primary project with the FAA, is the North General Aviation expansion. If we don't have this under contract by a certain date, we lose $3 million some dollars in entitlement. So it's pretty important that hopefully the contractors respond, we get the bids open, get them awarded, and under contract and grant before we lose the entitlements.
Motion to extend.
And I've been in contact with the FAA, they know the situation at hand, understand that it's out of everyone's control here. And they've said that the application can be submitted to their office, you know, by the end of June or early July. So we have time in that regard, so I'm confident that the entitlements won't be lost. The issue becomes just time to physically construct the project here in 2023. So one of the things that I would ask the airport authority would be to consider a special meeting just to review the tabulations prior to I think the next scheduled meeting's on the 13th of June. So we open bids on the 2nd, and then, you know, there's a week and a half. That week and a half is critical just to get, you know, contracts in place and, you know, contractors geared up, that kind of thing. So I don't think it could be done just on a simple Zoom call or something, you know, we don't need to review, but so we'll know more, you know, obviously with hard dollars, you know, on the 2nd of June.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'll just motion and assume that a special meeting would be in order.
Okay. So the motion is to delay this,
Extend.
do the opening and schedule a Zoom call meeting for approval of that as soon as possible after the bid.
That'll be June 7th. Aaron and I are in Denver at the National Airports Conference, returning on the 7th, 6th or 7th.
So John, you give us, just send out an invite there, we'll need a quorum, is all.
Media access.
Yeah, media notice. We have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Aye.
Bird.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Osborne.
Aye. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, let me just one
Yeah.
question. Do we have a strategic plan for the airport property,
Yeah, we have a
long
map.
term? When, I saw one that was updated about 15 years ago. And I'm like, I was driving, again, I'm off topic here, but we approved all this pipeline to go all over our property, and I was driving by that, looking at that and thinking, we probably should have someone look at that and say, what potentially will we ever do with this land? If it's going to be an industrial area or we do residential, because where that pipe goes then is a deterrent to, but again, we don't need to talk about this, I'm just kind of throwing this out. We have like 3,000 acres that the airport owns, and we ought to think about where are the future hangars gonna go, what are we gonna do long term? So
The last ALP master plan was done in 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. They're all
9 years ago.
Yeah, they're all on there.
2018, so the plan, and the FAA requires it updated once every 10 years, so I'll get you a copy of the master plan.
No, I have a copy of that one. It's, to me, we should be thinking about the next 20, 25 years for the airport. And so we can help, set that.
So the
So
master plan is-
what are they requiring? When is it updated? Every 10
Every
years?
10 years, so, and it's a 20-year projection, just like it was in the terminal area forecast, it's a 20-year outlook. That's
So the last one was 18?
I think it was finished in 2018.
It was started in 2014, 15, and then, finished.
So we're due for another one
Because
now.
that's where this airport layout plan comes from, that's back here. This is hundreds of thousands of dollars in multiple meetings with tenants in terms of just the use within the airfield. And of course, the property up north, the noise contours, the buffer, the clear zones, the desire of your predecessors to protect that property for the Air National Guard. So we bought a lot of property up to the north there to keep it as agricultural land for the safety of aircraft that's operating. And we have a long-term navigation easement with the state of North Dakota for perpetuity to protect that, so it just remains agricultural land.
Right, and I totally understand that. I guess I hadn't seen this, but I'm thinking, this is all residential here, this is all industrial here. And then now that this runway 31 is eliminated or whatever that one was, this area over here. So I'm just suggesting we ought to have some thought about that, and if it's something that we're ever going to sell or do whatever, it would be.
So your predecessors and all the neighborhoods up here had the opportunity to go through the master plan with public meetings to go through here, so they have known for years this east-west runway is coming in. The problem is there's residential development right here that the FAA and the airport authority opposed, but the city of Fargo still allowed residential development here that should not be here.
Well, again, I don't want to get in the argument, I'm just throwing that out that I would like to be kind of engaged in that strategic
We're
plan.
protecting the property up here that we purchased, some of that's leased to the park district and some leased to the school district. This is all protected for future 3-6 right, running left. And when the Guard was operating the F-16s, we have the justification to build this runway because of the high-speed, low-speed mix of traffic, the ratio. Once the F-16s went away, we lost that justification, but we'll continue to protect the property up here for that development. In terms of, this here is a proposal as far as what development could look like for the GA. Obviously, this has changed now with what Fargo Jet Center is doing. So if you impose this here, working with the FAA and the Jet Center, we've kind of changed this format to what this is going to look like. So it's ever evolving and changing, but the property out here by the radar area, we've had a number of different firms that have
Chad, we don't need to go through this, you and I we can talk about this, I don't want to waste the whole committee's time, but
I'm saying there's been a lot of discussion about the development and use of the airport property.
I think I just need to get up to speed from it.
All right, item 10, long-term parking lot expansion, 63,000.
So you like the project for northern improvement, now this is the next phase of Meet Hudson Hall in that parking lot construction, to do the services inspection coordination.
Correct, this is one of the contracts that I mentioned to the authority a couple weeks ago that we were bringing forward, it's $63,000, it's a not to exceed amount. So hopefully we can get under that. Basically, it's just all of Mean Hunt's time to do all the construction inspection, construction staking, the material testing that's required, all of that kind of thing, just to make sure that the contractor's in compliance with the project.
And that's recapturing the parking spaces.
Where the long-term loss
Yeah.
is located at, so.
Okay.
Thank you. So that's filling in this gap, where the west side exit is right now.
Mr. Chair, motion to accept.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, call the roll, please.
Aye.
Bird.
Aye.
Capitone.
Aye.
Beckton.
Aye.
Osborne.
Aye. All right, item number 11, North Carolina Aviation apron expansion.
All right, so, I had handed out this exhibit here. This is, like Sean said, this is the primary project of the FAA here in 2023 that will be opening bids on, second bids. Obviously, it's a large amount. It's proposed amount of $1,088,000. It is subject to an independent fee review just to check that our numbers are aligned with a second opinion. Wes Schoen, who's a retired engineer that used to work here at the airport, is in the process of completing that as we speak. So any approval today would be subject to his concurrence that we're in line. So it is also a not to exceed amount. And just to give you kind of an idea of what it all entails is, since you will be receiving AIP grant money for it, there's just a whole slew of grant administration type of activities that need to be done. That just the FAA requires it just take time. So we have to certify payrolls and do DDE reporting and quarterly reports and the grant applications and reimbursement requests and it's just a time-consuming process just to handle the administrative side of things. There's also obviously inspection. We've estimated 30 weeks of construction. There's 155 days allowed here in 23, and then there's a portion of the project that they're allowed another 8 weeks to complete in 2024. So that's the reason for the 30 weeks. There's also there's quality assurance testing where we have to go out and hire an independent laboratory. In this case, it'll be Terrafine. Again, to do all the testing for concrete bituminous and densities, that kind of thing that the FAA requires. So that's a substantial amount of the cost. And then also the construction staking. Mean Hunt does all the construction staking for to all the grades and alignments for the contractor to construct. So again, a significant amount. Just to give you a sense, we had gone through in our estimate, just like the lumber for construction stakes for hubs and lat, that's like $5,000. Just raw material costs. There's another $20,000 or so just for the equipment time for the GPS, just to do the same. So it adds up fast. So again, it's a not to exceed amount, and obviously the goal would be to come under that. So,
Mr. Chair, I guess a question. So the North General Aviation construction and the hangars and facility that were created were approximately how many dollars? That excluding anything we had to do with?
just our construction estimate?
The actual facility that they're adding up there?
I
Do we
don't
know?
know that dollar amount.
Is it?
I'm guessing it's in the 20 to 25 million range.
Okay. The reason I say that is that the work we're doing plus what they're doing, I think you have to take into account the total project and apply this to that. So it is a big number, but I don't think it's a big number with respect to what the impact is.
You talking about the Jet Center expansion?
Okay, do we have a motion?
Motion.
One second, there's also another piece, again, you'll be receiving grants, FAA grant money for it, so we have to put a project closeout together, which basically just summarizes the project, all the financials, all the documentation, we have to report all the material testing, that type of thing, that's just a lump sum amount of the $10,260.
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Call the roll.
Hang on,
Aye.
or
Aye.
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 Alright. Thank you. Thank you. Update on small community air service development grant application.
The conversation we had after the DOT had extended the current grant that we received under the Small Community Air Service Development Program for Seattle service. That grant has been extended since about 2015 or 2016. It's a $500,000 grant as a proposed minimum revenue guarantee matched with local community-based funding between the Airport Authority, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the Economic Development Corporation. This grant here now is due by May 17th, which we worked with Valero Aviation, our consultant, to submit, is for the same grant requirements as what we have with the Seattle service grant. We will have to cancel that grant if we're awarded this new grant. And the goal of this grant here, as we chatted a number of meetings ago, is to obtain service to a hub in the southeast. We did get a letter of support from a carrier. American Airlines did provide a letter of support for the grant, but not indicating that service is imminent, but it would certainly help their process to look at the possibility of starting that service at some point, which when I met with American, they talked about expanding to Charlotte at some point. So, as I said, the local commitment is $500,000 for the federal grant, and then in terms of the community-based, it's about $150,000 from the Airport Authority, and then the balance is between the Economic Development Corporation and the Convention and Visitors Bureau, which will get approved moving forward with that. And then there is also marketing money that's provided by the Airport Authority in our air incentive program. They get $25,000 in the first year, and then $25,000 in the second year. That would be provided by the Convention and Visitors Bureau. And then we waive up to $30,000 in landing fees for the first couple of years. So I can send you a copy of it. It's a pretty lengthy grant if you want to read through it and the assumptions that were made, but hopefully the DOT will look upon this favorably and endorse the grant there. So just FYI for this.
Update.
Exciting news.
We have received grants before. We had one for Dallas service, which was successful. American is still in the Dallas market. There was one a number of years ago that, like I said, we applied for Seattle service, but due to Microsoft's lack of travel, there really isn't justification to continue that process at this time.
Alright, number 13, I'm sure everybody had a stunning review of the Code of Federal Regulations rule on airport rate charges.
I really do hope that you read it.
Yeah, no, it's a great deal of.
This is a policy that we have to follow, so when we talk about policies, this is even more critical than anything that we have. And the next one that you're going to get to be lengthier, but how does it look like a policy? Well, it makes it rare the Federal Register. This is what the FAA posts on the website.
My question, Sean, do we have a subject matter expert on this? Because as I read it, federal regulations are long on description and short on specifics. That if we have concerns within this policy, Stacey, are you the subject matter expert here, or?
I think that I am, but along with Stacy, the next person I got, so.
And then I have an outlet that does just airport law nationally, and quite often I will run questions by them to see what their analysis is, so I think it's an effort.
Well, in the first reading, my review of it was that it describes how we set rates and the transparency and related to cost factors, but there were a couple in section 4.2 and 5.2 that get into the specifics of airport revenue. And the one that they do not define other than to cite it was surpluses and how we build up surpluses within the airport. And that they're saying they don't want large surpluses built up. They give you no definition. Is a large surplus $20 or $200 billion? So I was just curious what the
So how we've had those conversations in the past, with previous large projects like the runway reconstruction or the terminal expansion in 2008, is the deliberate accumulation of cash by the board for a specific project that's on your capital improvement plan. And as long as the FA is on board with that, they understand that you're building up cash because one, the feds aren't gonna have all of their money available, likely, especially for terminal projects. Two, the timing of federal funding and when that may be available, the board has to have the cash to cash flow payments to contractors and so forth. So they are well on board, not only with the Minnesota Dakota region, but also with the regional office in Chicago in terms of the accumulation of cash that we have on board for the terminal project that we started, I don't know how long ago, John, but it's been years ago.
Yeah, it was just to me, as I looked at it, that, understand the warnings and use of cash, outside of your report, but it's really tough when you read a guideline that says, don't build up excess cash, and that's your guideline. And it's not, a certain percentage, it's, when I see things like that, to me, gotcha.
And then, if you remember, the city some years ago had concerns about our cash accumulation, and the mayor was critical of it. So then, with Kent Austin and others, we engaged the city's own financial consultant, as Prince at that time, now Baker Tilly. So Terry Heaton did a study, and airports our size need a minimum of 800 days cash on hand, suggesting maybe up to 820 days was the average for airports of our size. So that led to, okay, here's a baseline of what you're looking at. That's what Leibowitz and Horton is working with as we go through the modeling of the cash flow analysis for the terminal study and then whatever else comes in. So we do have that document from the spring study.
How many days?
800 days minimum,
800.
and then up to 20 days, so it's probably around 16 million.
About 16.
I think it's about 16,
15,
roughly,
16.
somewhere in there. So there's a reason for the madness, but the thing is, Sioux Falls isn't any different when you talk to them down there. It's a deliberate accumulation of cash for large capital expenditures that are on your CIP. We have to totally on board with that.
Yeah, no, Sean, I appreciate it, like I said, just in reading the policy, when they don't give you a metric, and they just say, don't, have large surpluses, and don't define it, it really, I mean, to me, it's just a real gotcha situation.
And I think they leave it vague for a reason, so if you take Atlanta, they'll probably accumulate 200-300 million in cash before they go into a large capital improvement project, so.
No,
I think they leave
just,
it vague for a reason.
yeah, but, so we do have subject matter experts if we need to delve into that. Okay, so that's just, information, I hope you all enjoyed reading that. Let's see if we can find even more exciting book club reads. The Code of Federal Regulations is just riveting. I really recommend it. Insomnia or anything like that. Airport construction security updates, anything?
Yeah, so I think we're getting, real close on the exit plaza, they're done with grading, they've removed all the trees, they are, working on the enclosure of the, starting today, of the generator. We're actually making them put, a temporary cap on the top of the building because, there's a roofing contractor messed up and didn't get the custom one ordered, and so it's gonna take some time. We didn't want that rubber that is just sitting out there and flapping and so we're having them put that on there. That's starting today, actually. There's a couple things on hold. We found a little bit of asbestos in the old checkpoint building, just in some caulking and stuff, some low level stuff, so that has to be removed before they can hold that up. And then I think there's some pavement marking that SP Plus and Darren are discussing their opinions on it before we finalize that, so.
I have one question regarding the parking plaza. So I drove through there a week or so ago, and the control thing looks very
I don't have anything to do with that.
Is that S&P that does that? If, like, there's duct tape and things were broken and,
Darren brought that to their attention. Greg, will, she can forward you the picture, Greg. Some of the stuff that's on the flash parking revenue system stuff, so we'll forward you. Just how the messaging works on there and the taping and so forth. I don't know if that's stuff that Jay is doing or what, but we need to get that changed. We will reach out.
Okay, we'll take a look. Just to add to that a little bit, there'll be overhead signage will be in soon, so some of that messaging that may be on the kiosk will be on the overhead signage at the exit plaza very soon. And not to mention, we also have identified that we have the capabilities to make announcements at the kiosk as well, so that way we can kind of discontinue signage and messaging on the kiosk and so forth. A lot of that may have been with just really trying to get the message out on how to use the reservation system to passengers and things of that nature, but we'll take a look at that and get it cleaned up out of the way.
The center lane's also been closed. I don't know if it's ever been open yet. Each time I've gone through.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman, I apologize for cutting you off a little bit. We did reopen it as of, I want to say Friday or Monday, yesterday or Friday of last week. We had an issue with the flash system, and that's the park system that you have out there. The reporting was not necessarily the way it should have been reporting credit card revenue. So I'll just leave it there. We did get that corrected, and so to mitigate it as best we could, we had to close the middle lane and just direct passengers or parkers to the cashier lane to the far left and the far right lane.
Yeah, it's just tough when you're opening up a new facility and have one of the lanes shut down.
No, I agree. We have weekly calls with Flash every Thursday at 1 Central to discuss open items and things of that nature. And obviously, if anything comes up before then, we hop on the phone and get pushed in to get it corrected as soon as possible. They were corrected, and so that's why we were able to reopen the lane.
And I'm happy to hear that you're going to be doing something with reader boards, because it seems like with the duct tape on the dispensers, and you got about 6 or 7 temporary signs directing you, and it really doesn't put forth a professional image of, hey, we've spent all this money to have this upgrade, and so we kind of lose the sizzle there.
So Greg, did you confirm that Daktronics shipped those signs from Indigo?
I did. They were shipped on Thursday, so we can check in with them. I would say by today or tomorrow, we'll see if they've arrived.
And the pay on foot unit's been out of service for a couple days here in the terminal as well. I'm not sure what's wrong with that.
So that was part of the RMS command install where Flash came out to install the intercoms first at all the locations, which the pay on foot machine will have one as well. It appears the infrastructure, the fiber optics for the pay on foot does not go through the same fiber pairs that the parking lot is tied to. It may be on the city's network even. And so we're working with them as well, and we're going to have to obviously have some input from the airport to try to figure out how to get that intercom tied into the phone system at the exit plaza. So we're working through that as well, and that was identified almost the same time with the reporting issue. Well, the reporting issue was definitely the huge priority, so we asked Flash to get that up sooner than later so we can open that middle lane up.
All right, is there anything else for the board?
All right, so for some security stuff, to be later, so I think possibly at the next board meeting, we may want to meet in executive session. Fargo, Grand Forks, Rapid City, Bismarck have been working with the respective congressional delegations on a TSA mandate that came out, unfunded mandate for airports to start to screen airport workers when they show up at the airport starting in September, with zero guidance on how to do that. There was a meeting, Jordan was part of a call with North Dakota, South Dakota airports that are impacted by this, along with the federal security director and others, and there is no guidance other than you have to do it. Darren had reached out to a local private security firm to see if they'd be available at random times during the day to provide this screening. I've got Stacy engaged in it because Montana, South Dakota and others have concerns about Fourth Amendment rights and local political subdivisions doing search and seizure of workers as they come on board. We have a briefing tomorrow morning with the congressional delegation, at least the North Dakota delegation tomorrow morning, to bring them up to speed and to find out what they're doing. I know Senator Thune is trying to work on it as well. Triple E's has worked on it, but this is being forced upon us at a considerable cost. It could be as much as $300,000 a year to try and do this. But there's some concerns from our liability company, PIG, same company that has the Bismarck Airport. We may not have liability insurance if this were to go into place and someone at our watch gets through and does bad things. There's a lot of balls in the air here, so just letting you know that it's a concern. The passenger that you heard about in the newspaper gained some attention. All of those inquiries were to go through the TSA, but I think DAY chose to run with it. So a gentleman showed up for a United flight, I'm not sure exactly what day, let's say last Wednesday, and he was basically 24 hours early for his flight. He was still able to get through the checkpoint because he had a valid ticket within 24 hours of departure. The Chicago flight had already left, the Denver flight was at the gate. He was distraught that he missed his flight, and come to realize, well, his flight is tomorrow morning, the next day. But nonetheless, the gate agent opened the door to start the boarding process from United. He took off down the jetway. Okay, so he was stopped by the workers in the jetway.
Went into towards the plane.
Yes, he went in through the door at gate 5. And stopped there by the UGE workers and held until the police department and private security got there to take him out. So he did come back the next morning. In the meantime, United Airlines had decided not to allow the passenger to fly because of the incident the previous day. Although, since he's not on the watch list, he could go down to any other carrier and get a ticket. And I don't know if he approached the Delta counter or whatever and cost, but nonetheless, he took off, ran through the checkpoint, got all the way to gate 5. And of course, the cops got involved and engaged, and then he was taken into custody there for criminal trespass and further things. So there'll be some federal charges that will be forthcoming for that incident there. So. But those things can happen, and luckily nobody at the airport was hurt in that situation. So security-wise, that's there. Escalator, we have Dan isn't here. We got noticed by Otis, our escalator company, that the 2 motors that run our top escalators are no longer being supported parts. So basically, they're out of service. So we're looking at an estimated cost of over $150,000 to replace both of those escalator machine motors, which we'll take under advisement and bring back to the board once we talk to Otis and Dan to see if it's something we want to do. Replacing the escalators is not part of the terminal expansion project. They were put in, I think, in operation in 2008, Terry, is that correct? So it's just maintaining those and keeping those up to speed. We'll go from there. As far as marketing consultants, Rick had sent an email, Paula, so I have engaged Norm Robinson to see if he's interested in doing it over a week ago, prior to the last meeting when this came up. I also engaged Advanced Aviation Marketing. They are an airport marketing firm out on the East Coast that specializes in just airports. They are going to put together a proposal as well to be a marketing consultant. Norm isn't sure if he's going to do it yet. We're going to have a couple more conversations. He said he knows nothing about airports. It's a specialized unit, much different than the business that he's in, but we'll take a look and see if he's interested. There was another name that was provided, but I haven't engaged that person yet. Hopefully these 2 will respond, and I'll bring them forth to you at a future meeting.
There's one more bullet point that I'd like the consultants to consider, and that would be to have an in-house marketing person. And then when is our next time we're gonna talk to Brandon or the interior people on the terminal extension?
I don't know that offhand.
Well, the meeting today at 3:30. So I'll ask them when the next thing. And we're kinda, there'll be a lull here a little bit with regard to getting some schematic design. guessing it'll be pretty soon. Yeah.
So, one thing I was thinking would be helpful to the board is if we could do a walkthrough of the current terminal when we're talking about the expansion or some of the updated projects, whether it be, concessions or where the TSA, if we could actually be walking through the terminal when we do that.
Good idea.
They've got a lot of concepts put together. We gift shop the restaurant to show them the concepts and the space that they'll have available, kitchen location. So it's pretty well laid out. It's here and there for some things, but they pretty well have identified their concessions. If you like the look of the bar area where the checkpoint is now, it's pretty good.
Okay. Sometimes it's easier to conceptualize when you walk the space, and since we're so close to the space, I just thought maybe assist us. If we can do that.
All right, anything else? Meeting adjourned.